Hello my friends! I'm back with yet another paint making video. But before diving in, I thought it'd be nice to just talk about life for like 2 minutes. Just because videos that solely talk about art honestly aren't my favorite. I enjoy them, but I don't love them. And my past 3 videos were so focused on creating paints. And now I'm tossing another one at you. So I'm just gonna take a moment here, and if you don't like hearing about life updates, then you can skip ahead 2 minutes. First of all, I turned 25 this month. And it's crazy because I still feel like a 17-year-old. I just hung up some fake ivy and some fairy lights in my room in typical teenage fashion. So yeah, I still feel like a kid, but that's fine. Strangely, I don't feel a crisis coming on, just because I already had one at 23, so I've been through the whole quarter-life crisis thing. But I was kind of surprised. I thought turning 25 would bring about just so much emotion, just because I'll literally drop a glass of milk and I'll have an identity crisis. So the fact that turning 25 didn't have much of an impact on me, it's a good sign. I think this will be a good year. The past few months have been pretty much defined by a lingering sadness, which is kind of depressing, but I feel a lot better now. I think a big part of it is because winter's approaching, and I live in Vancouver. So during the fall and winter, it rains about 80% of the time, which is kind of miserable. There's something called seasonal affective disorder. The acronym literally spells SAD, SAD, and I'm totally self-diagnosing here, but I definitely have it. The weather impacts my mood so deeply. So on top of being on house arrest like everyone is right now, the weather is also bringing me down. But I managed to book a week off for my birthday, and it really helped. I dove into art like there was no tomorrow. Mental health-wise, this is probably the best I've felt since mid-March. So overall, starting my 25th year alive, pretty strong, despite everything going on in the world. But yeah, I feel like things are gonna look up, hopefully. Fingers crossed. On my birthday, I rewatched all of Carmen Sandiego, the Netflix reboot, and it's such a great freaking show. It is my favorite show. That and Miraculous Ladybug. I was really bummed that season 3 was only 5 episodes long, and so far season 2 is my absolute favorite. Every episode was just fire. I really hope season 4 steps it up. I really, really, really hope so. We need another season 2. We need some really good episodes. But by the way that season 3 ended, it seems like it'll be pretty promising. So yes, I'm very stoked for that. I also finally watched the Miraculous Ladybug New York special, and whoa, that was way better than expected. I thought I'd be disappointed, and that's why I put it off for so long, because it came out in, I think, late September. But during the full hour of watching it, I was just completely engaged. Marinette grew so much in this episode. The Adrianette moments were just pure gold, so cute, my shipper heart is bursting at its seams. So yes, if you're a fan of either of these series, then we need to fangirl. Let's talk in the comments, please. I'm dying of excitement for what's to come with these 2 series. Okay, so now that I got all of that out of my system, it's time to talk about the paints. In my previous 3 videos, I was working with something called lake pigments. It's basically the process of harvesting dyes from natural materials, i.e. berries, red cabbage, beets, and other fruits and vegetables, and adhering the pigments to a neutral substance to create a pigment powder. If this sounds like something you're interested in, then definitely check out those videos. I'll have them linked down below. So long story short, I wanted to find pigment powder that didn't cost an arm and a leg. And then I thought, what if I crushed down some chalk pastels and used that as my pigment base? So since I still had a ton of watercolor binder left from my first experiment, all I needed were some pastels. So I bought a 36 set of Mungyo pastels from Amazon, and not gonna lie, I was shocked by how tiny they were. But the entire set, I think it was less than $20 Canadian, if I remember correctly, so it was fine. The pastels have raving reviews as well, as being both affordable and high quality for the price. And if you're interested in them, then I'll have a link down below. The binder, as mentioned in one of my past videos, is essentially 1 part gum arabic, 2 parts water, and half a part of glycerin/honey, with a couple drops of clove oil to act as a preservative. Again, this recipe is a combination of Arlene Bean and earthpigment.coms, both linked down below. So I mold these colors in 2 batches, the first being straight from the chalk pastels. The second, I ended up crushing quite a few into little containers and mixed my own colors. But since I totally lack color theory knowledge, it took a ton of trial and error, and I'm not totally happy with the colors I came out with. If you haven't seen any of my past pigment and paint making videos, then let me tell you about my homemade mulling set, aka my pride and joy. I used a white smooth tile left over from one of my dad's renovation projects in place of a glass slab. The Muller set itself is a $3.50 flat base candle holder from Michaels with the wooden handle of a toilet plunger gorilla glued onto it. Not too shabby, if I say so myself, and I kind of just saved myself like $150 with the setup. Compared to my homemade lake pigments, these pastels were a lot easier to crush and mull. I didn't end up with all those rough clumps that I did last time. Instead, it was quite smooth. I only mulled for about 15 minutes, and man, they just melted into the binder. And I think a part of this had to do with the fact that there was already some sort of, I'm guessing, gum arabic binder to hold the pastels together, which sounds great, but it did pose a slight consistency issue, which I'll bring up later. It took a couple of tries until I figured out the right amount of pigment and binder needed to fill a half pan, so that's why I have a few that are half empty to start with. Here is the first batch of colors I came out with. The next set took a bit more work, but was easier in the long run. I crushed the pastels beforehand, that way it'd be easier to mix my own colors. The first turned out beautiful, a dark grayish blue color. I started off strong, and I applauded my color theory knowledge. But then, of course, it went downhill from there. Of course, my first attempt was a total fluke. The colors following were a combination of 3 to 4 different colors, which was totally unnecessary. I just kept adding different pigments to try to save the hue, but ended up with completely standard colors that weren't very special. Not as special as the first, at least. So these are all of my chalk pastel paints. And I know they look a little funky. They're super tacky, like I'm gonna show you. And this is supposed to be completely dry. It's like stuck to my finger. So my guess is because the chalk pastels already have some kind of binding mixture in it, and I added my own on top of it without adjusting it at all, so it had the same amount of honey and glycerin as I would have used with regular dry pigments. I think it's just, I don't know, it changed the consistency, but that's fine. We'll see how they work. I'm sure they'll re-wet a lot easier than my homemade pigments did. So I'll just set my camera up and we'll swatch them out and we'll see how they turned out. Next came the swatching. I swatched these on my Canson Mixed Media sketchbook, and the colors turned out pretty nice. I honestly was expecting them to be more vibrant, but overall, not bad. Especially for anyone who wants to experiment with creating their own watercolors without needing to spend so much on actual pigment powder. This was fun to play around with, but I actually ordered some pigment powder from a website called Color Rare to create watercolors as the next step of this whole journey. I couldn't resist. So just so you have a bit of background, I have the tendency to go through many phases. Hula hoop dancing was a recent one. I still have some roller skates in the corner of my room that haven't seen the light of day for a long time. You get the idea. Art is one of the few things that's remained constant in my life. Paint making is new, but I really hope it sticks around in my repertoire. Although, knowing my track record, it's really hard to say. So I hope this isn't confusing just because I have other random swatches here. But here, we can go over them. So, in terms of the colors I mixed, it was 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 were the ones that were just straight from the pastel. So overall, I think they look pretty cool. We'll see how they work on actual watercolor paper. I want to limit my colors though, so I'm not sure how I'm gonna approach this. I don't even have any idea of what I want to create, which is step 1. But I really like these two here, so I'm definitely gonna use these two. And I don't know, I have a lot of greens and blues going on, so maybe I'll just stick with some of the greens and blues and see what I can do with a more limited palette. I don't know if it'll look good. I'm terrible at color theory, so we'll see how it works out. But I'm gonna play with these, and of course I'm gonna record the entire process so you guys can watch. Anyways, a video on paint making with my actual pigments will come to you at a later date. I think after this one, I'm gonna give paint making a bit of a rest in terms of my uploads, but I'll still be working on some paint making on my own time, and hopefully a video will come out in the next, maybe in a month or month and a half, we'll see. In terms of the art piece, I created this on Arteza Premium 9x12 watercolor paper. And I know there are mixed reviews on this paper, but I love it. It has such a unique texture, it can hold a good amount of water, and for the way that I paint, at the moment at least, it just totally works for me. I really enjoyed how these paints blended together, and they ended up being very transparent, which I was actually surprised by, because chalk pastels on their own are quite opaque, and I really thought that characteristic would carry over in watercolor form. I usually line my work with ink, but this time around I went with a more softer approach, using the pastel watercolors and a watercolor pencil to take care of it. I think it worked out pretty well. Of course, in my usual fashion, I avoided creating a background and instead splattered paint all over to add some visual interest and texture. But seriously, if any of y'all have any beginner-friendly resources for creating backgrounds, please share them. I'm kind of overdrawing floating characters. Like, I am ready to move on with my life. Okay, that's kind of a lie. I love drawing floating characters, but it'd be nice if it were a choice and not a result to my lack of background knowledge. Overall, the paint worked like regular watercolors. Aside from transparency, I didn't notice anything incredibly special with these, but they were easy to work with, and the colors blended quite well. Unlike my homemade pigments, which impacted the way that I painted because they were just a very different experience than I was used to, I felt just as comfortable using these pastel watercolors as I would my typical watercolor set. In terms of the piece I ended up with, it was okay. Her hand's a little bit off, her neck also looks a bit wonky, but I enjoyed the concept and I might actually repaint this one day to the point where I'm happy with it. Let me know what you think about using pastels to create watercolors, or if this is something you've tested before. Also, if there's anything else that you can make watercolors out of, I'd be really interested to know and maybe even run some more experiments. My next big upload will be creating my own homemade cotton watercolor paper, which, if you thought lake pigments were a journey, you haven't seen nothing yet. So stay tuned for that. Hopefully I'll have it ready to go within the next few weeks. Subscribe if you haven't already, like this video, or unsubscribe and dislike if you didn't. I support freedom of speech, so do whatever your little heart desires. Fun fact, for those of you who are unaware, this channel used to be an animation theory and discussion channel. So every time I post an art video, I lose a lot of subscribers, which of course is understandable. But I'm definitely looking forward to the day when my subscriber count begins to grow upwards instead of downwards. So until then, stay creative, stay healthy, keep creating art and possibly art supplies. Peace.